Hi, I'm Miss Tyler, and welcome to Context for Kids, episode 18, Mishpatim, right ruling. We're going to talk about some really interesting things today, and the Torah portions are going to get a lot different. Okay, so here we are, Torah portion Mishpatim, Exodus 21:1 to 24:18, and this is going to be really different than what we've done, and our videos might be getting longer because there are a lot of really interesting things. We're not talking about storylines anymore. For a while we're going to be talking about specific laws, and I'm going to talk to you about the things that we find out from archaeology and the ancient Near East that make sense of these laws because not a lot of details are given. But we find similar laws in different places, and a lot of times God's laws will be radically different from a similar law in another country because, well, God's laws are perfect and the laws of other countries are sometimes kind of messed up, like this first one we're going to talk about. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, an eye for an eye. You hear it's in Exodus 21:24, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It's talking about if you damage somebody, you get damaged. But what does that really mean? Is that talking about revenge? Does that say, oh, okay, well, you slugged me, I get to slug you? Not exactly. It's talking about justice. And God's big on justice, but it limits penalties for one thing. I mean, if, somebody punches you, you can't punch them twice, or if, they kind of the arm, you're not going to knock them out and their teeth are falling out. That's not what it's talking about. God's system of judgment is always going to be fair, and it's always going to be in keeping with the crime. But, not every country was like that. I'm going to read you a law. Now, in the Bible, there's a verse that says, the soul that sins shall die. And you're going to see why that was even said. You kind of go, well, of course. I mean, you don't punish a guy's kids if he does something wrong, right? Right? Well, listen to this from the Code of Hammurabi, and this is a great book, Parents, Law Collections from Mesopotamia and Asia Minor by Martha T. Roth. And I use this a lot, and this was a present from a dear friend. So anyway, here we go. Listen to this. Law of Hammurabi. Now, these were written in Babylon about the time of Abraham. So, Law 228. If a builder constructs a house for a man to his satisfaction, whoops, wrong. I got to go to the next one. It's the next law. Number 229. If a builder constructs a house for a man but does not make his work sound, and the house that he constructs collapses and causes the death of the householder, that builder shall be killed. Now, okay, you can see that's an eye for an eye there. But they really took it really far, the idea of you do exactly the same thing. Number 230. If it should cause the death of a son of the householder, they'll kill the son of the builder. That's seriously messed up. I mean, God's laws wouldn't do that. God's laws wouldn't punish, the son if the dad did a bad job building the house, but that was Babylonian law at the time of Abraham. That's pretty nasty. But Torah law says, the soul that sins, he shall die. And they're not talking about every sin, but there are sins in the Torah like murder, idolatry, those kind of big sins where the community would stone you to death. Anyway, so next one. This is one this one's really cool, okay? And I'm going to talk to you about the Ras Shamra text. Did I say Shamra? Yeah. Oh, okay. Anyway, you see this 3 times in Scripture, and the first time you see it is in Exodus 23:19 when they're talking about the Passover regulations. And at the end of the Passover, now of course Passover is the memorial feast in the spring that's celebrating the liberation of the slaves from Egypt. We just spent the last, month talking about that. Well, in Exodus 23, it talks about how you will keep the feast and what you will do and what you will not do. And I keep hitting written that. Well, I did it last week too. I'm going to get a bruise. Okay, so, but every time they talk about Passover, maybe not every time, but 3 times when they talk about Passover in the first 5 books of the Bible, they mention the exact same prohibition at the very end. Do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Well, they're not talking about human kids. That'd be messed up. They're talking about baby goats. But I bet you already knew that. So, who would boil a baby goat in its mother's milk? Goodness sakes, that's messed up, although that is a dish in the Middle East today. I saw it on a menu from an Israeli, an Arabic kind of like restaurant in Israel. Ugh, that just seems, there's just something wrong with that. So anyway, they found these Ras Shamra tablets, okay? And in one of them, it's talking about a Canaanite fertility ritual. Boiling a kid in its mother's milk, and it was done at the time. It was done in the spring, during the Canaanite harvest feasts. So really what God is saying, you know what, that is what they do. That is messed up. Don't do that. Don't take a little baby goat and then milk its mom, and then boil the baby goat in that. That's wrong. He's saying don't do what the nations do. And we're going to see that in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, I think it's 4:2 and 12:30 through 32. They said, don't go into the land, find out what those messed up people do for their gods, and do it to me. That's not cool. I have my own ways of being worshipped. Thank you much. You don't need to add to it. Not by boiling baby goats in their mother's milk. Jeez. So anyway, that's what that is, and we found that in the Ras Shamra tablets. It's really cool, and I've got a book with that too. If your mom and dads want to know about that, I can tell them the book. All they gotta do is contact me. Okay, so now something really cool that I didn't know. You know, I was reading the Bible over and over and over again for years, and I gotta be really honest. The Old Testament just never interested in me until just, you know, a number of years ago, and I used to just kind of read through it so I could get to Yeshua, Jesus. It's sad, but it's true. I like Genesis, though, and I like the first part of Exodus, but when it got into all the other stuff, I got bored because, you know, I didn't understand it, and sometimes when we don't understand things, we think it's boring. And it's kind of natural, but that's why we're learning this stuff, and I want you to see how cool it is, so you'll go, I know what that means. That makes this exciting. And I know something that most grown-ups don't even know. So, here we go. On the mountaintop. Well, what did I mean by on the mountaintop? I never noticed that in Exodus 24, I mean, I read it over and over and over and over again, that Moses and Aaron and Joshua and the 70 elders, they actually went up on the mountain and they ate with God. Who thinks the food was really good? Yeah, really good. Okay, so they went up there and they saw God, and it says they saw God and they didn't die. They were there, and there was the sapphire pavement and God's, oh my gosh, just God's throne, and wow, I would have loved to have done that. Seriously, that would have been cool. But it also went along with wandering in the desert for 40 years. So, you know, there's downsides to everything. All right. So they go up to dine on the mountain with God. Now, I didn't talk about this before, but why up on the mountain? What's the big deal about God being on top of the mountain? Well, in ancient Near Eastern thought, and we believe this comes because of the original garden in Eden. Okay? You know, there's a verse, and when it's talking about the garden, by the way, it's a garden in Eden, it's not the Garden of Eden. Eden wasn't all garden. There was a garden in Eden. And it talks about this stream that flows down into the garden. Down from where? And the garden was two The east. East of what? Well, this is one of the things that's not written, but when you look at the mythology of all the surrounding cultures and you look at God, he's always up on a mountain. I mean, it's well, not always, but Mount Sinai, Mount Moriah, where Jerusalem was built, okay? And gods were believed to dwell on the top of mountains. You've heard of Mount Olympus probably with the Greeks. Well, where do you think all these cultures got that from? I think, and a lot of scholars think, that the Garden in Eden was to the east of the mountain of God, and that God had an earthly throne, and that from that throne flowed rivers of waters. And we even see that later in the Bible. We see that in Ezekiel when it's talking about the millennial temple, which is really exciting that there was a river that flows from his throne. Okay? So, gods were associated with living on the top of the mountains. That's why people in ancient times, they never went up on mountains, because they thought the gods lived up there. And when you look at the gods of other nations, you did not want to go where they were, because they were seriously messed up. You wanted them to leave you alone, because a bored god is a dangerous god. That's why they worshipped idols. That's why they kept them in the temples. And they fed them their food every day. And they brought them their drink. And they clothed them, and they bathed them, and they dressed them. They took care of them so they wouldn't get hungry and bored and start messing with people. Because if you read all the mythologies of all the different, whenever they get involved with people, usually it's going to end up badly for the people. Of course, our God's different. Our God's not like a human being. Their gods were like humans. Their gods were like the worst of humans. And as we're going to go through the Torah portions and we're going to see a lot of these laws are legislating against the kind of stuff that we saw their gods doing. And of course, if a person's gods are doing stuff, you know that people are going to take it as an excuse to do that too, whatever they want. You know, people don't change much. People do what other people they admire do. And it's no different than with the gods in ancient times. You see people who you admire, you see the gods who you look up to, who you worship, doing stuff, you go, hey, why not me? Well, that's why we have a perfect God who makes perfect laws. Because we can look at God and we can say, okay, there's no downside to doing things his way because he is not messed up like the gods of the nations. Like the Egyptian gods and the Babylonian gods and the Hittite gods and Assyrian gods and everyone's gods. Because our God is different. And that is why things are going to be different from now on, because we're going to be going through the laws and we're going to look at them and we're going to look at how God was setting up a kingdom that was different from any kingdom on earth. And he was setting up laws that were going to teach people how to love each other, how to not do bad things to each other, and when they do make a mistake, how to make things better. So things are going to get really interesting, and I've got a lot of really cool stuff to share with you. And parents, I know there are some kind of difficult things to explain to kids in this Torah portion, and so I'm going to be blogging about it later in the week on www.theancientbridge.com. So check that out. I'm going to try and do that every week and blog on some of the more difficult laws to explain. So, you know, you can read them, and if your kids are old enough, you can share that information with them, and if not, well, you've learned something. Anyway, that is this week's Torah portion, and I hope that you've learned a lot, and I hope that you had as much fun as I did. Okay, so end of week 18, and I hope you're going to read the entire Torah portion. You know, if this is your first time through, remember, my friend Sarah Hawks Valente wrote Lessons in Yeshua's Torah, and it takes your young ones through the Torah portions. There's coloring pages, there's just There's crafts, there's fun stuff to make it a whole family thing. And she does the Torah portions the exact same way. I do not the same information. She's a mom. I'm kind of a history buff. Torah Puppets has brand new episodes and a brand new YouTube channel. Now all you got to do is type in Torah Puppets and it will show up. And of course, context for kids, honor and shame in the Bible, 10-week family dinner table curriculum to teach your family how to read the Bible in an entirely new way. And I've had people as young as 7 go through it. And I have a 62-year-old who has gone through it. And so, you know, challenge yourself. It's a lot of fun, and I promise you it'll change everything you think you know about the Bible and especially about our Messiah. So that's it for this week. I hope that you enjoyed yourself because I really enjoyed myself. And look, I love you. I'm praying for you, and I hope you have fun studying the scriptures together this week. Bye.